Alright, cool.
Going live. I'm gonna watch some of the Starburst down my throat.
Starburst.
No, I definitely probably have still Starburst. Like, guys, I'm eating Starburst. I'm sorry. I didn't eat dinner. So I'm eating Starburst. Anyway, welcome
Yummy.
everyone. This is On Just Restart. This is my podcast that I do, I guess, Monday nights now again. Anyway, but yeah, so this is a Nintendo podcast, and we're going to be talking about Nintendo things, as we usually do. We're going to be talking about a apparent leak of Breath of the Wild 2's name, which I initially caught wind of through Nate from Nintendo Prime, who is back on the channel tonight.
Sweet, how's it going? It's a very interesting leak, that's for sure. Well,
Yeah.
call
maybe.
it a rumor, don't call it a leak.
Potential leak.
Potential leak, but that's what every rumor is, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny, the verbiage rumor leak, right? Like, so whenever we say something's a leak, we don't necessarily know if it's a leak until it's announced.
Until it's proven true. Then if
Right.
it's proven true, it was a leak. So it's like, and that's what gets all the language confused. I try to clarify, like when I do videos, a rumor is something, I can't prove it. Nobody can. That's a rumor to me. Then if it ends up being proven true, it sucks because then that was a leak. And like when I say something's a leak, it's something that I can basically verify in some way. I would say things like
Right.
data mines, like a data mine. You can like verify a data mine. So, but in the end, if rumors end up true, then it was a leak the whole time. So,
Yeah.
and I will say the word leak performs very well on YouTube in comparison to rumor. So there's that as well.
Yes, people tend to like to use that, but the problem with that is that oftentimes it's misleading. So it's kind of
You mean every time when you report a rumor as a leak?
yeah. So it's kind of it's tricky how that works, you know, because I try to be honest, but being honest also means less views. So
Yes.
I
think
choose to get
here's
less
what you do, here's
views.
what you do.
You gotta play the algorithm.
You clickbait the hell out of them, but then you start out by wearing a full suit of tin armor at the very beginning. First clip, it's like, now you know what kind of video this is.
Can't
Just
take
end
it
it there.
seriously.
You can't take it seriously. From that point forward, it's like, look, yeah, we might have a serious conversation, but I started with the ultimate skepticism, or like just dump a bucket of salt on your head. I don't know, something like that.
Yeah.
I'm just giving ideas that I've done in the past, which
I've seen some of them; they're kind of funny.
although
yeah.
I've never done the salt bucket one. That's a new one. I'm gonna have to go get.
It'd be
I'm gonna
funny
have
if
to
you
go buy enough
literally
salt
just
to pull that
start
one off.
a video with a bucket and you just like pour salt the first few seconds.
Everyone, for our very first story today, we got a nice little leak.
Yeah,
Bunch of salt.
please take this with at least a grain of salt, at least. But
At least the same amount of salt that I've just dumped on myself.
yeah, exactly. So Brandon's also here, guys. How you doing, buddy?
Yeah, I'm doing good.
Doing good. Good.
Yeah.
You ready to talk about not only this leak but also Mario Kart, because we didn't do the podcast last week, and also Kirby, which is apparently really darn good. And I know because I've been playing it and I like it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are we supposed to talk now? Or?
I don't know. It's just kind of going with the flow here. Yeah, but that's the basic plan for tonight, guys. We're gonna be talking about our impressions for Kirby and the Forgotten Land, and also the Mario Kart 8 DLC, because I've at least had a lot of time to play both, a decent amount. So I can definitely give you my thoughts on that. And then a big part of this discussion is gonna be dedicated to a potential name leak for Breath of the Wild 2, or rumor. Potential leak, rumor, same difference. Yeah, that's the basic plan for this evening. But guys in the chat, please let me know how everything is looking and sounding. And on the note of the chat, I will check you guys out, see how you guys are doing. So the basic idea is that, you know, we'll do a little bit of Q&A, and then we'll jump into a topic and then go back and forth. Brandon White, Homer J, hello there. Robeer, hello. I thought this was kind of funny. Robeer had said before we went live, man, I was 20 when Metroid Prime 4 was announced. I'm feeling old. And I responded, I could be married with kids by the time Metroid Prime 4 comes out. I really could. Also, there's a good chance, probably not. But, you know, who knows what'll happen a year and a half from now.
But you're saying there's a chance.
There's a chance. There's a chance. If Metroid Prime 4 is canceled, then, you know, I could have a whole lifetime before it comes out. So we'll see. It's not getting canceled. It's fine. Don't worry. Probably. Fingers crossed.
What he's hinting at is there's potential major moves in his life in the next couple of years. Dun dun dun.
I don't think I even know the person I'm going to get married with yet. So.
Life update. Yay.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. But,
I hope I know the person I'm marrying. It'd be kind of weird if I lived with her this long and then I'm not married.
That would be a shocker.
That'd be a little strange. That would be a really big shocker.
Yeah.
Raised kids for 10, 11 years and then we just don't get married? That would... Well,
that's a curveball that I hope you do not have to see.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so as well. We're supposed to get married next year, but then again, we were supposed to get married this year, and we were supposed to get married 3 years ago. So, I mean, you know, if you just keep pushing it back...
The thing,
we'll just get married on
COVID
our
is kind of like
deathbed.
delayed like reality for like the last 3 years, almost.
Well, yeah, that doesn't help either.
Yeah.
Obviously.
So that's definitely shifted a lot of things. But looking through the chat here, Kyle Lindquist, hello there. She's got style, hello. You're going to be able to catch it live because we're doing a Monday night. Yeah. And I decided to do it an hour earlier mainly because of work reasons, but also because people also go to sleep earlier in the week. I guess it makes it a little bit easier for people to watch. So hopefully this time works out for you guys. I am seeing lower numbers than usual, but, you know, we'll see how things pan out. Make sure to like the stream, share it out to others. Gone Hunter, hello. Sweet Life of Dio Brando, your body is ready? It better be. Having Hope 5, hello there. Birdman Senpai, thank you for coming by and modding, my friend. Super Chris, you as well. Hello there, guy you don't know. How you doing? Natsu. Hi. Crazy Scoff, what's up? I'm doing pretty good. Natsu, thank you for letting me know that everything looks and sounds great. I appreciate that. Taker610 with the super chat. Thank you very much, Taker. Taker says Kirby fights Mewtwo at the end of the game. Why would you spoil? Why would you spoil the game like that?
Damn it!
I have a funny...
I was almost there, and now it's ruined.
Yeah, you might as well just not even play the game now.
It was the biggest crossover in gaming history, sans Smash Bros, and you ruined it.
I'm pretty sure if Mewtwo was actually at the end, I would have heard about it already.
But that's the thing. You're only in on it if you know.
Yeah, but the thing is, the way YouTube works...
You spread it, they delete the game off your system.
The way YouTube works, though, people will take the game before it even comes out, and then there'll be people like putting the thumbnails of the final boss, and you're like, oh well, I went on the internet and now everything's spoiled. I haven't seen that, so that's kind of good news for me, but it's because I just haven't been watching enough YouTube lately. Maybe. But actually, you know, there is something I did watch, but Nate's busy right now, so I'll give him a moment before I segue. I was gonna segue to his video talking about the leak, but we'll get to that in a moment. Take your time, buddy. We're not in a rush. Except
no,
we
we're
are.
good. I have a garbage bag leaking, but it is what it is. I can't really fully take care of it until after, so.
That's all good. So, but let's just jump into it, right? And this, I initially got caught wind of this from you, so I feel like it would be more fair if you were to kind of like, you know, explain what happened. But, you know, basically, someone who knows things has said something of what the name was, at least at one point, not too long ago. Is that a very, very simple but appropriate generalization, Nate?
Oh, hold on. It just... I know what you were talking about. YouTube just kicked me out.
Oh.
That's lovely. I'm okay, though. Yeah. I'm assuming that what you said, because I don't actually know. Yes. Because I couldn't hear you, because YouTube was kicking me out. Yeah, so disconnected, now I'm reconnected. I have no idea what's going on.
But yeah, we lost you for like half a second. It wasn't that long.
I don't know if there was a blip on my internet or what. But
you're good now, though.
Yeah, I'm good now. So repeat what you said. That way I have full context.
Well, just...
Even though I know you're talking about my video, so I can kind of...
I gave a very basic summary, so when you explain it, it actually makes sense. Like there's more to actually say. I didn't want to just take all your words away. So basically, the game, someone who knows things said the title of what it was at some point. That's yeah.
So I know a bit more than what I can say, and I said that in my video because it's just all about protecting sources and everything. This is not my source, by the way, so I'm not protecting anyone that I know in terms of who is the person who got this information. But it all came from Paul Gale from Paul Gale Network. He is an industry veteran. He one outlet that people might instantly recognize in the Nintendo community he worked at for over a decade was Go Nintendo, and working for Raw Meat Convoy, Kevin Cassidy over there. They actually just recently relaunched. You guys should go check it out now that they're back after being gone for like 9 months.
Right. Yeah,
they're back now, which is good. They're back in my news rotation. Got another place to find news at. People want to know where we find our news at. It's places like that, or Nintendo Life, or certain people on Twitter, or etc. Other YouTubers, all that stuff. There's a whole conglomerate of ways you can find out news. Anyways, he used to work there, and he's worked at a few other outlets, and he's been to every single E3 that's ever existed in person, with media credentials for all of them. And somehow I didn't meet him at any of the ones I went to. Go figure. Even though I knew who he was back then. But anyways, now he's more like he's more of a teacher, and he teaches martial arts and everything, and that's like his passion, and obviously video games. But he runs his own website where he still puts up news, and the whole reason that anyone pays any attention to him, and this is all just context for why the rumor even got brought up from him, isn't just because of what he's done before. I mean, he has, when he was a journalist, he did leak things like some stuff about PlayStation All-Stars back in the day, but also he's still extremely well connected in the industry, so much so that he's the one that gave us all the exact pre-order data for Kirby, for Metroid Dread, and like 5 other games last year that were landing on Switch, and was literally proven 100% accurate the moment Nintendo dropped the official numbers, which is important because it meant that his sources, which you guys can infer who his sources are from the data being 1000% correct, obviously means that he still has those connections that he made a long time ago with people at certain places that I'm not going to talk about. And in this case, he sometimes occasionally gets information on games that haven't come out yet, and he shares that information. Now, he actually shared some stuff about Pokemon as well that I haven't talked about, that is a first-hand source. But what he decided to do was obviously focus on the most hyped game, I think, for Switch, at least at this exact moment. The game that's most hotly anticipated of them all. I mean, I know there's you Switch sports fans and strikers and, Pokemon Gen 9. I get it. There's actually a ton of big games coming out. So if it's not your personal most hyped game, that's okay. But we're talking about a potential top 10 best-selling game on Switch this late in generation potential here, which the only other game I think coming out this year besides Legends Arceus that has that potential would be Pokemon Gen 9 or Breath of the Wild 2. Like, those are like the 3 big system sellers. Who knows? Maybe Switch Sports surprises us, hits 15 plus million.
It has a chance.
Yeah,
Splatoon
because
3
Wii
also
Sports
has
was
a
so
chance.
big.
They have a chance.
Yeah.
But
yeah, Splatoon 3, like they have a chance. But I think a lot of people could look at it as Zelda's and Pokemon.
The sequel to the 4th best-selling game on Switch, and very likely, well, there's a good chance it'll become the 3rd best-selling game on Switch once everything's said and done.
Yeah. So it's very highly anticipated, and obviously the game that helped launch Switch, and obviously took Zelda to a whole new level in Breath of the Wild, and this is the sequel to it. So he decided to focus on this, and he says it right in his post. I'm just sharing everything that's publicly available. It's the source of a source. So it's somebody he knows who talked to somebody of importance, which is why he calls it a rumor, because as someone who's been a journalist before, he knows you don't call source of a source a leak, at least in his opinion, because he can't verify it personally because he didn't talk to the originating source. That doesn't mean the person that he got the information from isn't trustworthy. But again, that requires naming people, and I'm not going to go that far.
This is by definition of a rumor, right? Like, you think about rumor in the classical sense, like you go back to school and then someone says something about another. Someone said something about something, and they said something to someone else. That is a rumor. It could be true. It may be exaggerated. It may be entirely inaccurate, but it also could be true.
So the framing of it then was that obviously this came from, a source of a source. And he trusts this source of a source, but again, he can't verify. So, or at least has been unable to. I'm not going to say he didn't try to verify, but has been unable to, because obviously information on Zelda is usually really, really scarce until Nintendo wants you to know. Doesn't mean things don't leak. It's just very rare. So, essentially what it broke down to is a handful of things that he, might have learned if this is true. One of them is that at one point, he's not sure if this is true anymore, and the originating source apparently said that this was a while ago. Didn't reference what a while ago is. Is it 2 years ago? 3 years? Last year?
3 weeks.
That there was a name for the game floating around at Nintendo of America, and that name was Breath of Duality. Now, whether or not this is just code name, what they were calling it at the time, that's one of those. Who knows? We won't know till it's officially announced. But there were some interesting aspects of this that could make this rumor true, because obviously it was never necessarily that this will be the final name, just that this was a name used at one point in reference to the game. And that would be the other aspects that supposedly Duality has to do with. For starters, being able to play as more than Link. That is one of the Duality aspects of the game, and if that's true, that obviously lends credence that this, was right the entire time, even if the title isn't.
Right.
Then there was a couple other references about Duality, something about light and dark, and this one was probably light and dark, whatever. That's in every Zelda, right? But the interesting part would be the other part where we talked about past and present, inferring some sort of time travel, or maybe that's where the Duality playing different characters comes in. So that was kind of like the big stuff there from this. And again, he labeled it a rumor. He made sure he was very open and honest about it. It was actually funny. I watched, I love Switch Force, but I watched their video about this today. And it was kind of funny watching Zach be like, I'm trying to be super respectful of him, but I have no reason to believe a word he says. And I'm like, you could talk to him. He's pretty open to have people talk to him, but that's okay. Some people would rather just make videos, and it's cool. I understand. There's people that this is just coming from my perspective when I'm making a video. If it's about something someone said, I probably already have reached out to them to ask them questions about it, and most of the time they don't respond. But at least I try to make the effort,
I think the thing is, most people assume there will not be a response, and sometimes even if there is a response, that response may not come when you want it to happen, especially if you have a video idea that you want to get out like ASAP and you message them. Maybe they'll get back to you. You have no idea when they'll get back to you, though, right? Mm-hmm. But again, it comes down to, are you a journalist or are you a content creator?
Yeah, that was one of the things. That's how I actually met Paul Gales. I reached out to him once about some sales data I heard that he said, and then from there he responded, and that's the thing. I try to be careful. Like anytime I talk about anything from Paul Gale, I guess I would consider him an internet friend of mine. So there is that context that, I have a bias to believe him, but it's because of the track record rather than because we're friends. I mean, behind the scenes, as an example, he's helping me with my workout routine and losing weight. So like, there is a relationship there, but if he's wrong, he's wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, the way he phrased it is, he's like, I'm not even saying I'm right. It's a rumor. It says, and people get really upset and skeptical about that because that's what us YouTubers do, right? We aren't really the source on much of anything, so we're always like, when you guys watch our videos, you're hearing it from second or third hand already at that point. Mm-hmm. So it was interesting to watch Paul Gale treat it like I would treat a rumor when he's going to be the person that people find it out from. But at least he's honest about it. I like that. So, but the sales data, he always acts like he just knows.
Yeah.
But he won't tell you how he knows. Well, at least publicly he won't.
That would be hard information, right?
Yeah. It's like, you're going to know, like, next week, this is verified. Don't even worry about it. Oh, look, I'm right. You don't need to know how I found out. You just know I know.
Let's tackle this, though. So, there's like two perspectives, or there's honestly more, but...
tons of perspectives.
But, so we could talk about how is the game actually going to be called Breath of Duality, and maybe, but to your point, it could. Let's for the sake of argument, let's assume this rumor is 100% true, which it may not be, but let's just assume for this conversation it is. Even if it is 100% true, that does not mean the game's going to release as The Legend of Zelda Breath of Duality. It could still just be a code name. And even if it's not a code name, it could be a tentative name behind the scenes, which is almost like basically a code name, and then they change it because they're like, there's probably something else we could name it better that might be better for marketing. Like, so those, regardless of if it's true or not, we don't know until Nintendo basically like tells us.
Hopefully this summer.
Hopefully, right?
I hope. Right. The thing is, if the name is as spoilerific as, the producer told us it would be. Well, then are you just not going to tell us the name until like a week before it comes out? I'm kind of confused how you can make the name that spoilerific that you can't use it to market. So it'll.
Well, let's talk about that.
I think they just
though.
didn't settle on a name yet last year. Is
Duality? I'm inclined to agree, but is Duality really that spoilerific? Like ultimately, it still comes down to interpretation, and all of my interpretations, which we'll get into, kind of can already be sort of assumed, or you can figure it out from the trailers, right? Exactly. So, is it?
Yeah, I always question, like, is it really more spoilerific than anything in the trailer show? Like, Duality is such a interesting concept.
I mean, maybe what it does, it sort of confirms some ideas we've had.
But like being, someone else playable besides Link, that would be a kind of big inference, because that, By the way, we've played as people other than Link before, just never for like huge sections of a game. It's always been a side quest or like the Phantom in Spirit Tracks, which
or like in Wind Waker, you could sort of play as Medley and Maker. It was as Link controlling them, so it wasn't really them, but you were using their bodies as puppets, basically.
The seagull. Don't forget the seagull.
Oh, the seagull! That was my favorite character.
That's the best, most playable character of all time. The seagull.
It was really fun.
Oh yeah,
it's like
it was fun.
Because he could fly. You're just like, oh, all of a sudden I can fly all over the environment. That's really cool. Yeah, it's cool stuff. I see another super chat here from Taker610. Thank you, Taker. The name will reference the arm, Zonai, or both. That would seem like a good guess, right? And actually, there's just honestly a lot of different ways to go here. But let's focus on the Zelda point. And by Zelda, I mean the princess. So, from the trailers, you can already sort of figure, okay, Zelda, at least from the footage here, seems to have more of a role in this game than the first one. And when you also take into consideration previous interviews, and I'm obviously paraphrasing here, but there were interviews where Aonuma was sort of asked about Zelda maybe being playable or like a female Link. And he noted, that's interesting, right? And eventually, it came out that this character is Link, and that's it. This is not a female Link, or it's not like you can kind of pick your gender. Link is Link, Link's a boy. But he did find it interesting that there was a lot of interest for a female Link, or a playable female lead. So, with that in mind, perhaps that thinking translates into the next game after Breath of the Wild. So we have Breath of the Wild 2. We see Zelda with a slightly more athletic sort of look. She's traveling alongside Link, and then she falls down a hole. She falls down a hole, but the thing is, based off the first trailer, it seemed like there was an implication that there's going to be a lot more underground exploration. And if we are playing the same world as Hyrule, you got to think they're going to have to do something to make it different than just the world we're exploring. So, if Zelda falls down a hole, she seems to have had some design changes, potentially suggesting a bigger role, maybe even a playable role. And then you have Link in the sky, who's exploring all the skies. And then you have this name of Duality. Then everything sort of starts to kind of piece together, right? It doesn't have to be this way, but it does kind of add up. And what's also interesting, because they're going to be in Hyrule, I'm sure the development team thought, okay, how can we make this different? If we're going to be in Hyrule, how can we make this different? I think kind of a very typical Nintendo thing to do, maybe have Hyrule be like that core area that will be changed and remixed, but they're going to create a whole other sky realm, as we've already seen, that's been confirmed. And then they're going to have an underground realm. And then you have like your heavens and your hells, or your light and your dark. You have your two different realms, right? There's two, they kind of mirror each other in a little bit of a way, which is a common motif in Zelda games. So I see it. Like, I don't think that's a crazy thing. Now, I also can easily see a situation where Zelda's still not playable, but maybe there's still some sort of connection there. Maybe she is underground. You see her in moments or something like that. But I could see it. I could see something like that happen.
Yeah, I kind of feel like she won't be playable, and that she'll be underground for a little bit. I don't think the whole game. I don't think she's just gonna be like, oh, I found the ground and now I'm just gotta save me, and that's like the end point of the game. But I do feel like you'll have to go find her underground and then rescue her, and she'll have some other role during the rest of the game. but I don't think she'll be playable. Maybe like a tiny bit, but not like a whole other second character or anything.
It just feels like a cop-out to have Zelda not just be a damsel in distress again. Like, we already did that. Like, I would like her to just...
Yeah, that's why I don't think she's gonna be trapped underground for like the whole game or anything. But it does seem like she at least gets trapped down for a time. She clearly falls. And then Link's, like, not with her. So, at least for some point in the game, she's down there by herself. That's like, pretty much confirmed, right?
She falls down a hole. I mean, what if like, Rivali or Teba comes and saves her afterwards? Like, Rivali's dead, but Teba's alive.
What if it's not a hole? What if it's a time portal? We don't actually see her
It's
land.
just getting wacky now.
Well, we don't see her land. We just see her fall down a dark pit.
I mean, that's not too different from what happens in Link in Majora's Mask.
Yeah, it's pretty much exactly what happened.
It wasn't.
I mean,
time.
you can infer there was portals and like you use the master, but like it's one of those. We didn't see her land. We don't really know where she's falling or what she fell into. It's kind of a. I think the connection comes because we saw Link and Zelda walking in an underground area and Link fighting in an underground area. So we're like, oh, she fell underground. Castle rises up. Maybe that's when she falls under, and maybe Link finds her. Maybe that's what leads to them walking together towards the skeleton. But it's also, we're just making a bunch of assumptions. We don't actually know anything. And that's, I think what's crazy about the trailers put together for these games is how little we really know. Like, we know a lot, but we then attempt to connect it all in ways that we don't actually know that it connects. And plus, this also presumes that everything in these trailers is even in the final game, which Zelda trailers have a huge history of a lot of things you see not actually being in the game. So,
it's fair.
I'd like to think that it's all in the game. I'd like to think the game was close to final when they showed that last trailer and they're just timing the release.
I have a feeling that the trailer they showed in 2019 is more of the kind of similar trailer to the one they showed off at E3 2014, where it's just kind of like, this is where the game is now, but it's not really necessarily a representation of what the actual game is, because the actual game looked very different. But obviously the concept and the general art style and everything was already pinned down then.
Yeah, I do feel
like the footage we saw in 2019 is very different and possibly even a higher quality in a lot of the assets and things that we saw compared to what we saw in the latest trailer.
We also gotta be careful because a lot of what we saw could be cutscenes in comparison to gameplay. That first trailer, there was like no gameplay.
We presume all in engine.
Usually use all in game assets. They don't usually like have different assets.
Sure. But they can also be pre-rendered, is what I'm trying to say, which could up the resolution.
I mean, they could be pre-rendered, but
to look prettier.
Did they have? I don't think they had any pre-rendered cutscenes. For
every cutscene in Breath of the Wild was pre-rendered. They're all movie files.
Okay. But they're all in-game assets.
And that's also why all of those files run at a very consistently high resolution in comparison to the rest of the game. That's my reference point comes because they just.
But it's not really resolution that I'm talking about. I'm talking about the actual assets of the game. They're the same. Like, they don't have better quality assets in those. They might be like.
Can you explain better? What do you mean by better quality assets? Like what does that mean to you?
Higher polygon assets,
okay.
Assets just to look better.
Better what makes them look better? I'm asking because not because I'm not trying to insult you or anything. I'm trying to get an understanding because a lot of times just having a higher resolution makes things look higher quality than it really is. The assets could be exactly the same. The resolution makes it look better. That's all.
Yes,
that's why I'm just trying to infer because I thought the same thing that like about the original game, and if you actually go watch the cutscenes versus the gameplay, the cutscenes look a lot better than the actual gameplay does, except when you play on PC and you mod and do all that stuff. But that's a whole different realm.
I mean, the way I just look at it in a very basic way, I just assume that what we see in the cutscenes is just a game running you know, on a higher spec computer, and it's just recorded.
Well, that's pretty much how they make them, yeah.
Yeah, it's based off the game, but it's just
except for interactive cutscenes.
They don't make better assets
Yeah.
for the game specifically for the cutscenes. They may bake them, but they're all in game. They're not made in a different engine or made with improved assets. The base flowers, the base rocks, the base textures, those are all the same. It might have better LODs, like you might see a tree loaded in and a better LOD at a distance or something, but you're not gonna see like an entire new model or just more grass or something that's not there in the actual game in those in the cutscenes is what I'm saying. You might see a higher resolution though, because they don't have to rely on the dynamic resolution.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I bring it up is a lot of Nintendo games, and we've seen this with Pokemon. That's a really great example. A lot of those assets made for the old 3DS games were completely done in HD with super high quality textures, and then they just downsample them to fit on 3DS at a much lower resolution. Which seems insane, by the way, because you're talking about a 240p screen. Why the hell are they even making the assets that high quality in the first place? But that obviously creates future flexibility, is kind of at least what we all presumed. And then they went with no national decks. So who the hell knows what they were really doing? But it was one of these situations, I think, where, and again, we're talking about hypothetical. We have no idea if any of the stuff we've seen is even in the game. I mean, we presume you're going to fall and be in the sky. That'd be a really weird cut from a game when that was a huge thing you showed. We presume the arm stuff is something and that the skeleton is something because we've seen the skeleton twice. I think those are all safe assumptions that those are going to be in the game in some form, even if it's not the exact form we saw. But I'm always really careful when we're watching something that clearly looks like a pre-rendered cutscene and then saying things like that's not representative of the game when that could very well be representative of what pre-rendered cutscenes are going to look like in this game. Because this game was built for Switch and not built for old hardware. Oh, that's more where I was coming from that perspective. So I'm saying they very well could be representative of the game, just only of cutscenes. Of course, we also haven't seen gameplay, like high quality gameplay yet, because it's all compressed videos. But
we haven't really seen a lot of much, and we have no idea if that's.
I've been very careful about that, right?
Like, what part of development that is. And I'm feeling that the version of the game that they showed is purposely has a lot of things stripped out of it to not reveal a lot, to only reveal exactly what they want to show. Funny?
So, how many of you guys played the... I'm not using this as a segue, even though it would have been a great segue. But we're not doing it, because I still want to talk about Zelda a little bit. But we'll see what happens. Anyway, so Kirby and the Forgotten Land, right? Did you guys play the demo? I played the demo.
Played the demo and the game. Yep.
And I played the game. And you notice how the demo, you play through the levels, and there are differences. Like, there are little differences. Like, they just kind of, some things are moved around, spaced out, changed somewhat. Same thing could apply to this, right? Like, even if whatever we see, to your point, Brandon, maybe they don't show us all of the elements, right? Or, it's simply a matter of they updated things once we got closer to the release. Like, it could be either or it's just cut. Like, that's also a possibility, given that it was a 2019 trailer. But it was also a cutscene, so it seems a little strange. But I wouldn't be surprised if some elements are a little different. Like, that's kind of to be expected. Like, it's not going to be exactly the same. Whatever we see, it's going to be a little different. For sure.
If it is exactly the same, I will be surprised. Because that means the game was really far along, even back then. And then we have to start wondering. The
game's been done actually for like 3 years, and Nintendo's just like, we don't need it.
Well, because I kept thinking, right, it has such a long development cycle, and I kept thinking, if COVID never happened, would this have actually been like a 2020 game? But that just messed everything up when they were finalizing it, because now they got to work from home. So it's just taking them all this extra time just for polish.
Yeah, I mean,
it's so hard to know until they get the game.
The 2019 trailer. Yeah. If you go and watch my reaction, Brandon was watching with me. At the end of the reaction, we're like, oh yeah, 2020 for sure. We were so committed to that.
And it looks super polished and good.
Well,
right?
I think that's what I'm saying. Like, all the new stuff they showed, like the floating islands, all that stuff looks a lot more polished graphically than the stuff they showed back on the on the ground on Hyrule that already existed. It looked like just like Breath of the Wild, like the first game. But then all the new stuff, like the first trailer, all those new caverns and stuff, that's all new stuff. That's all new, brand new assets. And then the sky, that's all brand new assets for that. Those all looked great. It all looked way better than the stuff they showed that used on the ground, that used older assets maybe. So maybe they're trying to still polish the original assets to look more like the new stuff they made. Because to me, I don't know, maybe I'm just crazy, but it looked a lot like there was a difference.
I think it's tough because up in the sky we don't see as many trees, we don't see as much grass, and like that makes up a huge chunk of the landscape down below. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really hard to know because, as an example, we all know the grass actually works pretty dynamically with the wind and the fire and you walking on it.
Yeah.
And even when enemies walk on it, it reacts to them too. So it's one of those that takes a lot of rendering processes compared to you're up in the sky running on some stone.
It reminds me of Mario Galaxy.
Well, there's a lot of grass up in the sky.
Yeah, there actually is. There's
yellow grass stuff.
For those who don't get it though, that are watching, when I bring up Mario Galaxy
and stuff, yeah.
When I bring up Mario Galaxy, it's because back when Mario Galaxy came out, back early on the Wii was a much weaker piece of hardware, but Nintendo still had to put out some really good looking games. One, because of aesthetically speaking, like artistic choices, but also two, they sort of just like kind of maximized what they could do with kind of like intelligent design. So like with Galaxy, they weren't making big open worlds. They were all smaller little platforms. And because of just smaller little platforms, there wasn't that much to actually put on screen and run. They could run those, whatever they were actually showing, at a pretty high level of detail, and it looked pretty impressive. So, you look at the sky, there isn't as much, to Nate's point, there isn't as much going on, because it's not like the ground, where there's this whole terrain to sort of, like, put there. So that might be one thing to sort of consider. But at the same time, though, I'm sure they're going to want to make the game, they're going to want the game to look and run the same, like it's got to be on par, right? It would be weird if like you go to one area and the graphics look amazing, and another area the graphics look like it's just running on weaker hardware. So we do see that sometimes, like there are areas in games that look better than others, but it shouldn't be like, for example, Mario Kart, where it just looks like it's a different game running on a different system. So we'll see on that, but I do kind of agree with you though, Brandon, that like the shots of Hyrule in the second trailer do look, they don't look like graphically impressive at all, right? But then like the sky stuff does look really impressive. So I mean, I am curious to see how it's gonna kind of all look once we actually get to see this game. So it's gonna be interesting to say the least. But let's kind of go back a little bit to the whole name situation. Do you guys think this is the actual name for Breath of the Wild 2?
No.
Breath of Duality.
No, and I'm gonna be honest, I don't like the name. I don't think it should be Breath of anything. It could be. I'm not saying that makes it less likely. I'm just saying I don't like the name. Like, I hope that's not it, because I think it's a dumb name.
Before you go, Nate, I want to speak to when Breath of the Wild was first revealed. I thought that was a weird name. When Skyward Sword was revealed, I thought that was a weird name. When Twilight Princess was revealed, I thought that was a really weird name. I was like, how are you gonna make this super hardcore looking Zelda Twilight Princess? Like, it seemed like a very sort of, pixie dust, not super like badass kind of name. And now in hindsight, I mean, it's Twilight Princess, it's cool, but I'm just saying sometimes names.
Well, to clarify, my biggest issue is that it's just the same name with like a tiny bit change. Like, I don't want that. Have they ever done that before? Off the top of my head, I've just been thinking through names, and I don't think they've ever done that.
Well, it's
just like almost the exact same name.
The only straight sequel for console we've gotten is Majora's Mask, right? And the name doesn't really match at all.
Yeah.
For console.
And then other ones
for home console.
I mean, you could say
not
that
console.
Like, Phantom Hourglass is pretty
That's
much a
for
direct
home console.
sequel to Wind Waker, but
Yeah.
it's for a completely different system. But I mean, it's still like I don't think they've ever had a name that's that close, and I don't think that they would do that now. I mean, they could. I'm just saying I don't want them to.
I don't think they need to.
Would.
I understand why someone might think it would make sense because you want people to know, hey, this is the next Breath of the Wild. But I think the Zelda brand has expanded as a whole, and if people know it's a big open world Zelda, that alone puts it in the Breath of the Wild sort of conversation, and people don't need the name for it to know that.
I don't think Nintendo thinks that they need the Breath of the Wild branding necessarily, and I don't think that they should lean on that because they're not going to make Breath of the Wild sequels forever. Like, Zelda needs to not get into this box of just trying to do Breath of the Wild over and over and over again, just being like always chasing after Breath of the Wild again. Like, I don't think that's good for the series to just be defined by a single entry.
It's not Nintendo.
So even if it is a sequel.
So, just speaking to the title,
we did go on.
I don't know if it's good or bad. If this is going to be true or not. My opinion is it's probably not going to be the title, but would I be shocked if it was? No. But what's interesting is that Breath of the Wild sort of broke the mold, not just with, obviously the gameplay and everything else, but how they title games. Why was it called Breath of the Wild? What about the game justified that name? Oh, it's because it's an open air game. Okay, so it's an open world game. What the hell is that? You can complete Breath of the Wild and not really understand that what that title means. Because nothing in the game makes reference to Breath of the Wild. Whereas in the past, Twilight Princess is literally a princess that's in the game. Wind Waker is an item in the game. Majora's Mask is, the character and mask in the game. Like, they've been very literal with their names, where it's an item, a person, or a reference to something that specifically happens, like A Link to the Past. It's because you go to the past. It's part of the game. Everything is about something, and then Breath of the Wild happens, and it's like, oh, well, you're exploring the wild. Okay, so you're in the open world. What does that have to do with anything? Haven't we had exploration in Zelda before in open worlds? Why is it now suddenly considered? Oh, because Hyrule's ruined. Okay, Hyrule's never been ruined before? Yeah, it has. Maybe not as big or as expansive as this, but it has. The original Legend of Zelda, everything was pretty much in room besides the dungeons. So it's interesting.
I think Breath of the Wild could have had so many other names, and it would have worked.
But the name just defines the very essence of what the game is.
Sure. So if you're making a
and I think they can definitely do that again, but they don't need to call it Breath of something to do that. I think Breath of the Wild was made a very specific reason, thought out very carefully. They're not just
was it bad to call Mario Galaxy 2 Mario Galaxy 2?
Mario is a completely different thing to Zelda, especially in its lore and just how they name it. I mean, have you New Super Mario Brothers U Deluxe? Like, don't bring Mario's name.
Well, I brought up Mario because their naming conventions in Mario. No, well, hold on, let me make my point first. The naming conventions in Mario work off games that are built and meant to feel similar. So when you've got New Super Mario Brothers, then New Super Mario Brothers U, then New Super Mario Brothers Wii. All of those were similar styled games. So if you're making a similar styled Zelda game, like this is literally a direct sequel taking place in the world of this game with very similar style of basic gameplay of the running around, the shooting mechanics, the way the grass interacts with you, the way the enemies move. There's a lot of similarities. It would make sense to use the similar naming convention. This is in defense of keeping the Breath of the Wild branding, because the biggest thing about that Breath of the Wild branding is Zelda has never sold 10 million copies. This one might be selling 30 million when it's all said and done. This is uncharted territory. This is why the sequel's even happening in the first place. It's happening because this game sold 30 million copies.
Yeah, but
also this is happening because the game sold 30 million copies.
How many other direct sequel games exist?
Hold on. Let me make my point
in the Zelda series.
Zelda had not sold 30 million copies when they decided to make this game. They decided to make this game before Zelda Breath of the Wild had even launched. The concept
how do you know
and
that?
the beginning, it's clear from the way that they talk about the game and why they make the sequel. And they started it as soon as they were done with Breath of the Wild. They said that themselves.
But they weren't, yes.
With
Breath
this
of the Wild,
concept.
And Breath of the Wild finished up at the end of 2017, and Zelda had already sold 15 million copies, being the best-selling Zelda of all time. Like, they made the decision and started development after this game had already become a massive success.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the truth is somewhere in the middle here, right? Right. Well, it's not so much that they knew it was going to be 30 million seller, but they knew it was already the best-selling Zelda game ever, right? So obviously, it made sense to go for
I'm
a
not
sequel.
saying that that's not a part of it. Obviously, that's a major part of it. I'm just saying that's not the reason that they made it. I think the reason they made it is they just had more ideas. I think it's exactly what
they could have made a Mario Odyssey sequel. They didn't do it.
They had more ideas for it, and that they wanted to do it. Like that's why they did it, because they had more ideas already. From the more than they had for the scope of DLC, enough to make an entirely new game.
I think that's obviously a subjective thing. We've seen some massive expansion packs added to games that were basically entire games in the past. Not necessarily from Nintendo per se. For other companies, you could argue like the Blood and Wine DLC for Witcher 3 was basically an entirely new game added in. That's why it was also expensive DLC. But that's obviously how other companies behave. We're talking about how Nintendo behaves, and Nintendo doesn't tend to do direct sequel Zelda games very often, except every single time has been when the first one was popular. So when the first Legend of Zelda came out, they immediately went to work on a direct sequel Zelda 2 because the first one sold so phenomenally well at that time. Then they didn't do any other direct sequels again until Ocarina of Time became the best-selling Zelda game of all time, and then boom, they made a direct sequel. Then they didn't do one again until Phantom Hourglass became the best-selling handheld Zelda of all time. Then they did Spirit Tracks, and we could talk about how Phantom Hourglass is technically a sequel to Wind Waker, and that's fine. But it happened. It happened. There were Zelda games releasing in between.
I need to speak on that. Okay. Phantom Hourglass, story-wise, yes, it is a sequel to Wind Waker.
Yes.
But gameplay-wise, it is not. It is not.
But it's Toon Link. It's Toon Zelda.
Look, as a Zelda fan, I appreciate the lore connection, but it is not a true sequel to me because it's not just about story. They wanted to give people a reason
to buy it by saying it's the sequel when they just didn't know if that. They didn't know if that touch control Zelda would sell on its own, basically.
For example, Mario Galaxy 2 is a sequel to Mario Galaxy 1, but story-wise, there's no connection. It's basically like a remix story-wise.
They repeated the story. But
it's like the same story but worse.
But gameplay-wise, it is absolutely a sequel. It's building off of the first one with new concepts. So
I've just looked at the history of the Zelda series, that a sequels always happen when the first one was extremely popular. And that's always been like the massive, like if Breath of the Wild tanked, we would not have a Breath of the Wild 2. They're not going to go back to the well on a game that they spent $300 million to make and make a sequel if it didn't sell well. Yeah. And they didn't know, obviously, when they released Breath of the Wild, that it would sell as well as it did. They hoped, but they had never seen sales like this before for Zelda. They had never seen Zelda sell the way that Pokemon sells.
That they were going to sell over 100 million Switch units, right? A lot of things.
I mean, if you believe Kimishima, he said it would sell.
Yeah, he did.
Same as Wii. Although he said Wii, it's actually exceeding Wii. But yeah,
it's outpacing Wii.
So they did expect it to be big.
Yeah, he expected it to sell better than the Wii.
Well, Nintendo knew that the Switch had to be more successful than at least the Wii U, right?
At the time, and
they're not unaware of people's once it was unveiled. They're not unaware of the positive reception that was out there, the millions of views being shown on their reveal trailer, and all the people making videos and like Nintendo is very aware of when we say something, if it's being received positively or not. And they knew Switch was being received positively, which probably framed the reference of, we haven't seen reception like this since the Wii was unveiled. Interesting. This thing might be another banger on our hands.
I mean, they do have to anticipate, right? It's part of their job to sort of like have an idea of where their sales are going, right? But also, things have gone about pretty much as well as they could have gone.
Well, easily. Easily.
So,
and it's probably
yeah.
exceeded their expectation because their original reference point was Wii. Now we're talking about it passing Game Boy. Now we're talking about it potentially getting to DS, and that was not even in their original projections. So
yeah, and I think the key word there is original projections, because once they obtain great success, they then readjust those projections, right? And maybe those projections are higher, but they didn't always anticipate that. As things showed that they were really strong, they adjust, right? But let's come back to Zelda here. We're going to talk about Zelda for a few more minutes. We'll probably take some questions on Zelda for like the last 10, and then we'll talk about Mario Kart and Kirby to kind of close out the show.
Sure.
Yeah, because we're 50 minutes. I mean, we're not bad on time because we don't have that much topics.
We're actually doing solid. And, and like the only thing I'd say about the title is we're kind of in uncharted territory for Zelda, where I could see that they specifically want to make sure when people see this that they read the title and they know, not the hardcore fans that know, but the general consumer that walks in the store, looks at that box and knows that's the sequel to the game I remember playing. I want to buy it. And I think that is where you could see the whole Breath of Duality, Breath of something, be a reference point that they look at that box and go, wait a second, what the hell is this? Is this DLC? It's a new game? What is this? I didn't know this game existed. And then they go, oh, they ask an employee, it is the sequel. I'm going to buy that thing. I didn't even know this. And you could argue, how could they not know? How could they not know? Again, we live in the bubble of the internet and always being around this stuff. My children do not. They only know there's a sequel coming because I'm in the bubble and I told them. And it's my son's favorite game of all time. He had no idea another one was coming until I just told him like last week. So this is kind of what I'm talking about. The kids, gotta remember, this week, 2017? This game could be coming out 6-7 years later. Be surprised so many people might not know.
Hey, Nate.
Yeah, what's up?
I disagree.
Okay.
I don't entirely disagree, just to be totally honest, but I do.
No,
I do.
I'm a piece of shit. Anyone who disagrees with me today,
you know what?
I'm an asshole today. I'm an asshole today if people disagree with me. Oh, are you gonna cut me? What is this a threat? Hold up.
It's just I was doing it for arts and crafts and trying to fix things that fall apart. But anyway, scissors aside, no threats, no slapping, nothing of the sort. That was bad. Anyway, I want to speak on that point or against that point a little bit, because while I do agree with you from one perspective, having some allusion to Breath of the Wild in the naming does have sense, right? It doesn't have to have breath. Maybe it has wild, or maybe it doesn't have breath or wild, but it has of the, or maybe there's just some combination that alludes to it without even being those specific words. There's a few different ways to go about doing it, right? And maybe it's not even the words itself, it's just the marketing. I do agree with you, they do have to make it clear that this is to the mass market, not just us hardcore gamers, but the mass market, that hey, this is of that similar ilk, and if you loved Breath of the Wild, you should get into this. So like, I absolutely believe they have to convey that in some way, shape, or form. I don't know if it has to be through the title itself, but definitely, it's got to be considered, right? But what I want to sort of like push back on, though, is if they were to kind of hardcore go, hey, this is Breath of the Wild 2, like let's say just call it Breath of the Wild 2, I also think they're kind of...
I like that name.
I think they're kind of putting themselves into a box, though, because yes, there are some people who just jump into the next one, right? But I feel like if there's a 2, there are going to be a lot of people that'll feel like, oh, maybe I should play 1 first, right? And there's a bit of a limitation there, I think, to some extent.
Wouldn't Nintendo want you to play 1 first and go buy it and get more sales? They're still charging $59.99 for that game today.
I'm just saying that it creates a barrier of entry a little bit. And I think it might make more sense if, yes, there's a benefit to playing 1 and then playing 2, but also making it clear it stands on its own. So, I think there's a balancing act to be had.
You think this has hindered Nintendo in the past? Because they've used numbers before.
They have.
Other franchises and games. Do you think it's hindered the sales? I mean, I'm just asking your opinion. I know what some of the data says, but the data isn't always different time frames.
I'm trying to think of specific examples.
Yeah, like Galaxy 2 is obviously the one that pops right away because that
is the first thing that comes to mind.
Well, do you know it didn't sell as well as the first one?
Yeah, so that was the first one that came to mind. I don't remember specific sales numbers.
I will say, I specifically, as a kid, when I went, I had money. I was like, okay, I can buy Galaxy 1 or I can buy Galaxy 2, and I was like, I gotta buy Galaxy 1 because I haven't played it yet, and I don't want to play 2 before I play 1, and I bought Galaxy 1. And then I never did buy 2.
You never bought 2, okay.
So all I'm getting at is
that Nintendo cares which one you buy, though. I think that's the thing.
I mean, ultimately, it's just cash in the bank, right?
That's just, I'm just saying, as an example, when I was a casual gamer, that is what I did. So
because a lot of gamers, and this isn't just from Nintendo. If you look at, like, Sony is really well known for putting numbers on things, whether it's their systems or their games, like Uncharted 4, and then it would have a subtitle with that. All of those sales stayed insanely high throughout, at least high for those franchises. So, like, I don't.
That is exactly why Xbox does not do numbers, because their console numbers would not line up. They'd be a generation behind PlayStation, and they didn't think that coming out with Xbox 2 when the PS3 was going to be a thing. They thought gamers would think the PS3 was a generation ahead of the Xbox 2.
I'm waiting for Xbox 2.
So they called it the 360 instead.
Yeah, they started off with Xbox 3.
Like, numbers play a big part in the marketing and
Xbox One was second.
Think of a game.
So,
yeah, and numbers do play a big part of the marketing. The only reason I bring up that I don't know that a number would be bad is because I think a lot of our lives were kind of bombarded with numbers. iPhone numbers, phone numbers, you know, the latest phone numbers, the latest phone, the latest and greatest. And that's what people view it like with games. Like, a lot of people picked up some of those Sony games over the years, where the first one they jumped into was Uncharted 3. It wasn't Uncharted 1. They didn't think 3, they had to go back and play 1. They said, I'm going to play the newest, and if I really enjoy it and don't understand something, maybe that makes me want to go back and play the older ones that are cheaper to get. Also, Sony re-releases their games all the time, so that's also another option for those people that Nintendo isn't always the greatest at doing. Although, if you're a Wii U fan, they love giving you Wii U games on Switch. So you got all the re-releases there. Not all of them, because there's still a couple of
way less money to put in for development because their games are already done.
Yeah,
and they still make money.
Like Star Fox Zero, come on, baby, let's get this thing over here. But well,
that might be.
I think numbers. There are definitely people who will not care, but I think just the fact that there are people who will care. Whereas if you name it something different, that group of people won't really be there. I think it does in some small way at least affect it.
So Breath of the Wild 2 can also cater to the 25 million that have already bought the first one.
It's not a bad market.
Yeah.
So I mean, it can go either way. Ultimately,
they like Zelda 2 was like the last time they used a number with Zelda. They called it literally Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link.
So I mean, and Zelda does that, right? Like every Zelda has an opportunity to become the best-selling Zelda. So, you know. And I see some people bringing things up in chat, so I'm going to just get to it because we're getting to chat anyway. And it kind of speaks to what we're saying here. So, okay, so Having Hope 5 says, I bet Breath of the Wild 2 and Xenoblade 3 will do better than their previous games. I honestly hope so. Birdman Senpai says, except for Xenoblade 2. Birdman Senpai says, Xenoblade 2 is the best-selling game for the franchise. So to that point, you have a sequel which does outperform its predecessor. However, it's a different situation, I think, because Xenoblade Chronicles 2 comes out years later on a platform that actually facilitates strong software sales for hardcore games. The Wii hardcore games didn't sell well. So Xenoblade 2 did sell a little bit better than Xenoblade 1. But I don't think that's like a strong enough case for it. However, you guys are also talking about Splatoon, right? That is a very good exception because you have, well, again, Splatoon 2 came out on the Switch, not on the Wii U. So what would have happened if Splatoon 1 had come out on the Switch first, right? Like, so I guess it'll be interesting to see if Splatoon 3 can surpass Splatoon 2, even though it's being marketed as like a straight up sequel. But at the same time, story is not a big deal at all for Splatoon. So like, you can jump into Splatoon 3. Like, you're not like, oh man, I really wish I played Splatoon 2 first. Like, that doesn't really matter. But I think games that are story driven.
For multiplayer games, I don't think the numbers matter at all.
No.
Splatoon's not story driven?
For shooters in general.
I'm gonna start getting into some deep Splatoon war here.
It's not the primary focus. It's not the primary focus.
But the entire next game is based off the story of the prior game.
Yeah, it's not the primary focus.
Even the multiplayer is based off.
Most people just treat it
The
as a
fact participation in the
shooter.
multiplayer shapes the story that ends up being.
And that is all good for the fan base, right? But you can jump this. I think most people understand.
That's
you
what,
can
that's
just
what keeps
jump
people
into
going from
Splatoon
game
3.
to game. To be
Yeah.
honest. It keeps it connected. But you
And-
don't. I know what you're saying. It's inconsequential to you could play it and not play the prior ones and not care.
Right.
But the number's still there. Who's to say you couldn't pick up Breath of the Wild 2 and not care you didn't play the original Breath of the Wild? It's kind of the same concept. They both have stories, but the stories can be inconsequential. Like the story in Breath of the Wild is not what it's known for.
And it really just comes down to the marketing. So it's not like be an end all be all for anything, right? Like I think if they go with the straight sequel route in terms of messaging, that's fine, but they just got to make some things clear, right? And it all comes down to the messaging and marketing.
Better.
What?
I just think it's like the worst option. It's like, yeah, it would work. It's not gonna destroy the game. People are still gonna buy it, but I think it's just a dumb option.
I just so since we're on the topic, I don't think Metroid Prime. I kind of want. I'm okay with Metroid Prime 4 being Metroid Prime 4, but I want Metroid Prime 4 to be Metroid Prime 4 the way Metroid Dread is Metroid 5. Call it Metroid Prime 4, but the actual title, the actual logo on the box, just strike the 4.
I don't think they will.
They maybe not, but I think eventually they should.
Yeah. No, I
think 4 is like a meme,
have subtitles. 2 and 3.
Yeah, no. Metroid Prime 2 Echoes, Metroid Prime 3 Corruption.
Yeah, so have a
subtitle. Metroid Prime 4 something. I don't think they're gonna drop.
Actually, you know what? Interesting point. Let me just look at the box art for Metroid Prime 3. Does it have the number on it?
I can't remember.
No,
I haven't seen
it does. It does. It's not pronounced, but it's there.
Yeah. So, my thing is like I think what and correct me if I'm wrong. What the other guest here was saying was something along the lines of, you don't want to stick with that naming convention because then everyone's going to assume like when games come out they're trying to like build off of and chase Breath of the Wild, but like that actually helps because the moment you go away from that naming convention, you're not chasing Breath of the Wild anymore. You're releasing something completely new. Like they're not going to keep the Breath of the Wild thing going forever. I think there's a possibility they make it a trilogy. I don't know. We'll see.
I hope they don't, to be honest.
And what, is this just because you don't enjoy the first one that much?
No, I love the first one. It's one of my favorite games of all time. I just enjoy the fact that Zelda as a series is constantly changing and evolving and going in completely new directions at all times.
But why was it constantly changing and evolving? Because a lot of what Zelda's done until Breath of the Wild was set up. Well, the reason I say is the formula of Zelda was set up in A Link to the Past and basically did not change until Breath of the Wild. They did different art directions, but the formula was the same.
Well, that's kind of what I'm saying. Like, I want a new art style. I don't think they need to rethink the entire formula again. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying I want.
You want a new art direction.
I want my, I like Wind Waker, and I like my Twilight Princess, and
sure.
I like my Skyward Sword.
I hear you. You want them to do it. You want them to do what they've been doing since, since I guess Majora's Mask, where they just change the art style, like with almost every release, unless it's a direct sequel like Spirit Tracks. And I understand that perspective because that's what Zelda always did. But I also think a lot of that is because Nintendo was chasing the dragon. They were trying to get as much sales as they can. And I think that's always been the goal with Zelda. They always felt like Zelda could be bigger than it really is. What's holding it back? Oh, is it the art style? Like, why didn't they do a follow-up to The Wind Waker? They were actually working on a sequel to The Wind Waker before they did Twilight Princess. And they were told by the then president of Nintendo America, hey, people in America don't like that art style, so don't do it again.
It worked.
They didn't.
Twilight Princess became
the best-selling Zelda of all time. And then
why didn't they do that again?
Because of the motion controls. I think there was
nothing to do with the art style. They could have made it.
Do you think if they released Twilight Princess 2 on the same sort of hardware that Twilight Princess came on in 2011, when you had Uncharted 3 and all these other games that were destroying what we could do with a realistic art style, you think that would have looked good in 2011?
I got a good explanation for Skyward Sword. So Twilight, they talk in interviews. They talk about which one try different art styles. And I mean, from one perspective, it does give you different opportunities to convey things in different ways, and it can impact your experience, right? So it does matter from a gameplay perspective. But remember how I was talking about Mario Galaxy earlier and how they chose the Galaxy style, which had small platforms, which facilitated, from an appearance standpoint, much higher fidelity looking visuals, right? And in that way, they were able to sort of have comparable games to the competitors, sort of, right? Not exactly, but you get my point. They looked pretty good because of the design choices. Mm-hmm. Skyward Sword, I feel, is a similar situation. Going with the pseudo cel-shaded Twilight Princess style, they could have a game that was somewhat reminiscent of Twilight Princess, but with a style that would age much more gracefully and also hold up compared to more impressive
They also talked
games.
about how, like, the reason the backgrounds are all painterly is because they wanted it to look good with the game blurry. And I think there was a lot of considerations that at the time Twilight Princess was being made, everything was 480. It wasn't a big deal.
Yeah, the image quality in Skyward Sword is oddly really bad, even considering it's 480p. It looks atrocious.
But they intentionally went with an art style they thought would look good while being blurry. Whether or not it looks good, that's obviously entirely subjective. Nintendo thought it looked good. That's why they did it.
Great.
I think it looks amazing at Skyward. Yeah. Back when they even put on emulators back then, I'm like, oh, dude, this thing's meant to be in HD. This is so much better than HD. But this is also that situation where I think this is my because, like, Breath of the Wild is obviously my favorite game of all time, and I'm never going to complain about getting more of the thing I really like. Or love in this case. And so getting a sequel and getting a third one is great. I also understand the perspective of, but you're losing some of the variety in the art direction and maybe some of the core gameplay mechanics like sailing on a boat or
I think with
going through 9 dungeons in Twilight Princess and stuff.
I think a third game would definitely be on a next generation Switch, you know?
Oh, yeah, totally.
And I think with that kind of power, it facilitates the ability to go for a much more detailed oriented art style. So I want to see what art style. Well, can you be more? Are you talking like a more realistic art style, or something more like a modern idea of an Ocarina of Time, or more like that Wii U tech demo, but a bit more modern. I loved that initial Wii U tech demo back in 2011, was it? Yeah, I would like that. I would like them to shoot for something more like that. To see what they can do.
I would love it too. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I've been wanting that thing to become a reality since we saw it. I think it also ended up hurting sales of Skyward Sword because people saw, oh, this is what it could be and this is what we're getting. But I really think that was not a good look. I mean, it was a great look for the Wii U until we found out the Wii U isn't any more powerful than what we already have out there in the other systems. But it was a great look at the time. And I do think that there is something to consider with that. I also think that the reason I don't think we're ever going to see that Twilight Princess more realistic looking Zelda now that we've gotten to the point where visuals can look this good is because Nintendo wants to keep their game rated E for everyone. And they have to be very careful in going with realism because it creates some more scarier moments, and that gets rid of cartoon violence into just being violence, and that leads to it having a higher rating. And they really don't want Zelda to go beyond T for teen. There's a reason that Ocarina of Time had even just blood censored. Like, it went from red to green. Originally red, it released that way. And then when it came to certain territories, like, no, you can't do that.
Twilight Princess, it was just like black.
yeah. So, like, I'm not saying they can't find a way to work around it. I just think that they like to keep the whimsical feeling of Zelda intact. But that's just obviously personal preferences.
I've against that before plenty of times, enough to where I don't think that they'd be.
How many times in Zelda have they gone
I don't think they're definitely going to go beyond teen. Like, no, they would definitely stick with teen there. I just don't think that art style facilitates. Like, I don't think that art style's any more gruesome than any.
You don't think fighting a super realistic looking giant spider isn't?
It wasn't. It's not like photorealistic, man. It's still very artsy.
If you take that Goma and you compare it to an actual picture of a tarantula, they look surprisingly similar. People with spider phobias are gonna have a much bigger issue with that than a polygonal two-legged beast walking on the ceiling.
Man, I think Ocarina of Time was pretty freaking dark. I think because the
it was
visuals were
dark.
so
It had dark themes,
weird and
they were very dark
simplistic.
Themes.
They did some things that just.
Terrifying.
But if they remade that the way that people want them to, it would not be. I think it might not even be rated T for teen. It'd be rated M. I think it just goes that far. It's such a dark game that if you present it in a more realistic modern art style, I don't think Nintendo gets away with the E10 plus or whatever it got rated back in the day. But anyways, this is beyond the scope. This is obviously getting into personal preferences. I just think Nintendo is first and foremost, and I'm just basing this off of what I've seen them do over the years. They're a business. They care about making money. They see this as significantly more popular than anything that Zelda has ever done over the last 35 years. So because of that, I think they're going to keep chasing that dragon. You might not want them to, but they're going to keep chasing it because as long as they can. That's why I think a third one would happen. The third one would be next gen. It would be a similar art style, but more detailed. And I think that they're going to keep chasing it and milking it until they can't milk it anymore.
I don't know. I think they will change the art style somewhat for the next big game after Breath of the Wild 2, but
and we'll see. How this game ends determines a lot too. Like we could kind of, when the last one ended,
I don't think it's the art style that sells Breath of the Wild. The art style isn't what sells Breath of the Wild. It's the gameplay and the scope.
The art style helps lend to the gameplay.
It facilitates
the grass works. Yes,
but
the grass works the way it does because of the art direction.
They can still accomplish those things, especially with more powerful hardware in the future, with a different art style. We'll see where that goes.
Have you seen other more realistic games have the physics of Zelda?
I'm not saying it's going to be full realistic either. But there's...
Okay. Oh, I was just noting that to go with the more realistic style requires often more processing power for all those intricate details. It takes away from the ability to have these super amazing physics, which is why things like Horizon Zero Dawn looks amazing. But when it comes to the physics interacting with the environment, it's even behind Breath of the Wild back in 2017. I
still think they're gonna change the art style somewhat. I don't think it's gonna be exactly the same. But
we'll see.
Yeah, well,
I think with a direct sequel, it's gonna be the same. I don't think they're gonna go away from it
if they do a trilogy, a true trilogy, not counting Age of Calamity. Age of Calamity would be The Hobbit. But anyway.
I love that comparison. That's a great comparison.
Thank you. Let's get to the chat real quick, and then we'll talk about a couple other things. You guys can continue on talking about Zelda and asking about Zelda in the chat, but I do want to progress with the other topics here.
Yep.
So I'm just gonna check a couple things. No, it's fine.
I'm on a time limit tonight too.
That's why I did the 90 to 120 minute window. Yeah, you guys burned a lot of my window there, but it's fine. We still got some Zelda. Window.
Come on now.
We knew. I figured I would give 45 minutes to Zelda and 45 minutes to the other two things combined, and then it became, I'll give Zelda an hour. Wait, I guess now Zelda's gonna get an hour 15. And we're not done with questions, so I'm just gonna check some ads real quick here.
Sure.
Giancarlo, didn't Eiji Aonuma state the Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2 is going to be the darkest Legend of Zelda game? I don't want to misquote him, but he did speak on the game being dark. So I don't know if it's necessarily aimed to be the darkest Zelda ever, but it's definitely going to be one of the darker ones.
That would be really dark. If they've gone down some really dark paths.
I mean,
Zelda.
Ocarina of Time had the original version has like a well with like chains and skulls and blood and stuff.
It torture scenes.
Exactly, suggestive themes of torture that would not harken back, but it's relating to a civil war and the lore of Hyrule. So it's pretty dark stuff. And then Majora's Mask is a huge mind bleep. So
they've had some. Yeah. If it's darker than that, that's sweet. I'd love it, but also
we'll see.
We'll see.
I think it's gonna be darker than Skyward
It'll be darker
Sword.
than Breath of the Wild. It will be. And Breath of the Wild, you could argue, has some themes in it that are darker, but not to that level. And I think when he says darky, I think he's just referencing compared to the first game.
Yeah,
and I think you can already see that with the skeleton Ganondorf. That already looks significantly darker than anything we saw in the original.
So we may circle back if we have a few minutes left.
Or somebody dies.
Octocrackness, will Breath of the Wild 2 even come out this year? It is slated for 2022, and we have no evidence to suggest otherwise. So until we get evidence to suggest otherwise, Breath of the Wild 2, I believe, is coming out this year, because Nintendo literally told us it would be coming out this year. Can that change? Yes, but we have no proof to suggest otherwise, so it's slated for this year. slated for this year. Thank you, Harry Myers. I appreciate the compliment. But let's move on. You guys can still talk about Zelda.
He's always looking good. Come on now.
Thank you. Appreciate
I strive to look as good as him.
I got issues, but anyway.
Don't we all?
Don't we all? Let's talk about Kirby for a little bit.
Woo!
Because
maybe
Kirby, you can get a sword, and it has a purple hilt, and you could wear a green little hat, which is obviously a reference to The Legend of Zelda. And this game is good, not just because of the sword and the hat, but because the game's actually really fun. And I'm not like, so the thing with Kirby for me is that I grew up on Kirby. Like one of my first, not my first, but I grew up on Nintendo 64, and Kirby and the Crystal Shards is one of my favorite games. Love that game so much. But I don't get every single Kirby game because they kind of feel a little repetitive. They're not too many new concepts, and the gameplay doesn't feel very deep for me, and they're usually not very challenging. I tend to prefer challenging games. Not always, but there's a strong inclination for that because I like, having triumph and such. There's a few exceptions like Kirby and the Kirby Canvas Curse, for example. I didn't get to play Robobot at length, but that's another good one. But this one, it's doing something very different. It's not side-scrolling gameplay. They're actually transitioning to 3D, kind of like in the style of 3D World or 3D Land. So not like a full 3D, but you can move around in a three-dimensional space, and you can do a lot more things. And from a visual perspective, this game is like leaps and bounds better than anything else we've seen from Kirby. I would say it is one of the best-looking games on Switch. I don't think that's too lofty of a statement. Feel free to disagree with me. But the game visually stands out. The game has lots of charm and attention to detail. I love just running around, and you can kick little rocks and shells, and they sort of dissipate, and there's foliage, and you can burn some of it. Or the world is somewhat interactive, and you actually can angle the camera a little bit and see more of the environment to some extent. It's very pretty, and the game's just very polished. I'm just kind of surprised at how polished this game is. Nate, how much have you played of Kirby so far?
How many worlds are there? I don't know. I'm not even
I do not know how many worlds there are. I'm in the ocean world.
That's going to tell me how. Let me see. How many worlds are in Kirby? That will let me know how close I am to the end. There is 7. So you're in the second world. So I would say I'm probably just about halfway through the game.
Wow.
At this point.
Yeah, for me, I'm focused on 100%ing. So every time there's
yes,
I make sure to get every Waddle Dee, and whenever I find the sort of side mission areas where you can go into another universe,
beat all the time trials.
I make sure to get the target time, not just to beat it, but get that target time, which is there's some challenge there. It's not so the game isn't even if you do wild mode, the game isn't hard, but there is some challenge. You're not just gonna breeze through everything. If you're a completionist, there is challenge.
But I will say it is easier than if you're a completionist and you are a completionist because you like challenge, then I would say being 100% in this game is not difficult compared to other games you might be trying to get 100% in.
No. I almost feel like you sort of are supposed to 100% this game. I feel like they're most people should 100% this game because otherwise it's very
This
easy.
is an easy completionist game, which is why I will also have 100% done. Which you guys will know I have not 100%ed a video game in a long time because it takes too long. This game does not. In fact, if I just wanted to breeze through it, I would have been done on Friday night when I live streamed it. Because just breezing through, not replaying levels, not trying to get everything, you could just breeze through it all and be done. I've been told in 3, 4, 5 hours. But if you 100% it, it can almost double or triple how long it takes you to beat it, depending on what you consider to be 100%. I consider 100% beating the actual times in those side missions. Some people might not consider that because you don't get anything for it except for 50 coins, and there's 1 billion coins in the game. So it all depends on what you consider to be 100%, which is same is true in every video game. There's always debates over what's 100%, what's not. By the way, getting all of the achievements and collecting all the Waddle Dees and doing all the little side things in the main missions, I think that's universally part of 100%ing because it's listed right there, a thing you didn't do. But Yeah, it doesn't really bother me that it's easier. I mean, it's Kirby. It's supposed to be. Like, if you really play games because you like super hard difficult, like if you are a massive Dark Souls fan who dabbles, who thinks Mario is easy, and you prefer like if you're gonna do a platformer, you want something that's challenging like Celeste, then you're gonna hate Kirby. Because that's not what Kirby is.
If you only play for challenge, yeah. But this game, I think
Kirby's just so fun. It's fun.
It has charm.
Yes,
it's oozing
the worlds
charm.
Are so, and each world. I know you're only in world 2, but each world you progress to, it's just better and better and better. Like it just gets crazier as you go, more gorgeous as you go, more inventive as you go. I haven't reached to the point where there's no more new power-ups yet, so I'm very curious what happens in the later levels, because I've heard a few people say, oh, once you run out of getting new power-ups, it's not as fun. I have no idea. I guess I'll find out, but
I don't know.
This game looks great, man. I love it. I have not had a boring moment yet.
I think that's the big point, as basic as that may sound. There's not a boring moment. And that was kind of like I knew I was gonna buy the game because based off the trailers and everything they were doing, I was like, okay, this game on paper is like a game I want. But because of the history of some Kirby games just kind of feeling maybe a little bit too simplistic, too redundant, too basic for me, I don't get into them. So there was a part of me, like Star Allies is the perfect example of that. I played the demo and I was like, no, I'm not touching this.
Yeah. Same.
But with this one, you know, even though I had that fear, I was like, nope, I'm gonna do it, and I did it, and I don't regret it. Like, I actually enjoy this game a lot, because it's, even if it is easy, right? Even though there is some challenge to it, it's just fun to explore the world and appreciate it. It's kind of like, it kind of gives me vibes of, well, there's a lot about it that just feels like very, like, kind of 90s Nintendo. Do you know what I mean by that? Or early 2000s Nintendo, where you have like these platformers that have like the big bosses at the end of the levels, and you have these different worlds you can sort of explore. It's not even like 90s Nintendo, it's just like kind of like 90s in general, where there's a lot of like adventure platformer games that have these cool worlds you can explore, and then you fight a big boss at the end. Mm-hmm. We've sort of shied away from that.
In the collectibles.
Yeah. And this is kind of like bringing that back, but in a modern way that works and feels smooth. That's the other thing about this game. It feels very smooth. Doesn't feel wonky. It feels very polished. There's an attention to detail. The environments are fairly interactive. You actually, it helps with your immersion. Like, you don't feel like you're just playing a video game. You feel like you're exploring this world of Kirby, even though it's like away from the normal Kirby world. But it's engrossing.
It is. And the funny thing is, I was just thinking of how there's no challenge. Have you done any of the mini games in Waddle Dee Town yet?
Not yet.
Okay. So there's this cooking one that you probably already have unlocked. You just haven't gone back to the town yet. Where there's a cafe. And it's very simple. It's a very simple one of those kind of like almost like Overcooked or any like those phone games. You have people come up with orders and you select the right items and you give it to them. Overcooked's more complicated because you actually have to make the food and cook it. Here you're just selecting the item. Well, they have like a frenzied mode on it. I've yet to beat it one time. I can't get through the lunch rush. I get dominated at the lunch rush every single time. You have to be so quick, and it's almost to the point where I wonder if I have outaged my ability to make my fingers and mind work fast enough to get through it, because it's a memorization and quick response. And I don't know about if anyone in the chat has actually been able to beat the frenzied mode on it even once, let alone doing it multiple times.
I'll do it.
So I will say, I know some people are like, oh yeah, the mini games are like whatever, and it's like they're hard as hell, which makes me like, this isn't a Kirby game. This is, it's a side thing. You don't have to do it, but this is one of the most difficult things I've ever done in a Kirby game in my life, and I can't do. It's such a simple game. This feels like a game they would release on their own as a phone app, but it's not. It's in the game, and I'm sucking ass at it. And I'm mad that I'm sucking ass at something in Kirby, so it just makes me want to go back to it. So like, I've probably tried that frenzy mode like over 40 times today.
Pun intended,
and like
though.
3 hours later, I'm so frustrated, but I'm like, this is Kirby. I have to. No, it's Kirby. Not allowed to be beat by anything in Kirby.
And what does Kirby do?
Eat everything.
Inhales.
Inhales, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just fun, and that's just one. I don't have. There's other mini games apparently too. Apparently a fishing one. I don't have any of that stuff unlocked yet, but if they're as challenging as this, I'm looking forward to it.
Have you had a chance to play co-op yet?
Yes. Yep.
I haven't had a chance yet. What do you think of it?
Waddle Dee is OP.
Really?
You can.
Is that how they make up for the fact that he only has one move set?
Yeah, I think that's probably how they make up for the fact that he can't use ability. I mean, to be fair, Kirby can ingest them, but yeah, okay, it makes Kirby OP in some situations too. But he's got this move where you can helicopter and then just drop a crap load of spears, and you could literally spam that on boss fights and never get hit.
Oh.
So it's pretty cheese. It's extremely cheesy.
Okay.
I had Eric. Eric was playing with it, and I kept wondering, man, how'd the boss go down so fast, dude? I just kept floating above it and spamming. I'm like, well, that's, damn it.
So does the game scale for co-op, or is it just like throw another character in there, thus making everything even easier?
That's a very good question. I can't speak on that because I haven't replayed anything that we beat on co-op.
My assumption is that it just becomes easier.
That stays this. I seem to recall the one level when we went back to it out of co-op to finish something, that there seemed to be less enemies, but I don't quote me on that because I haven't explored that enough to find out if that's actually true. The thing is, there's not a lot of enemies, I would say, per like screen area you're fighting on anyways. There's only the really select areas. Like there's one area in the water area, I'm not sure if where you end up getting bombarded with a bunch of enemies. And I never played that in co-op, so I don't know if that's even harder in co-op or not. But I mean, it was fun. It wasn't like we were regretting playing it.
What happens when you get in the car? Does Waddle Dee get in the car?
No, he sits on top, on the back, and he could chuck spears. So you're driving while you have all these spears being tossed in front of you. It's actually pretty funny looking.
And see, that's the thing. Like that's polish. That's attention to detail. You know, they took the time to animate all that. Mm-hmm. And you could do something cool with it, you know. And
give the second player something optional to do besides just sit there. Yeah. Like
a lot of other games, they would just have the co-op player teleport to where you go, and that's it.
Or maybe
bubble.
If you get too far away from him, he teleports to you.
Yeah,
that's one criticism that Eric, who was playing mostly as Waddle Dee, had, was that he'd be over here trying to beat this thing, and I'm over here trying to open this chest, and he's like, no. Just drawn right back to me, and I'm like, I'm sorry. And a lot of that does come down to obviously it not being split screen and it not letting you have free camera control. So the camera will try to keep you both in frame, but if you get too far from each other, it's going to favor player one and drag you back over. So
yeah, it's pretty much
as long as you're working together and not trying to just run off and do your own thing. Eric, talking to you,
you should be watching.
You're fine. You're fine. He's probably too busy playing Kirby right now,
sure.
To be honest.
Of course. Yeah, but yeah, the game's good. Like, it's a really good game. It's so good that I now feel very confident in saying this. I speculated before, I suggested it before, but now I'm 100% committing. If I wasn't already fully committed before, and I am now, this will be the best-selling Kirby game of all time. Which is probably not even really that bold of a statement, but
I think the best sold just over 5.
Yeah, and Star Allies is close to that, so I'm pretty sure this is going to completely destroy Star Allies.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see 8, maybe even 10, depending on how long they market it for.
Yeah,
and it helps that even the reviews are solid. Yeah, it's not getting in the 9s.
85 on Metacritic is really good. That would be Game of the Year contender last year. Just saying.
Yep.
I think Game of the Year was like an 84. So just for the record.
Yeah, I mean, put it this way, like, I know that Pokemon's a bigger IP, but it rated right around what Legends Arceus did, and it's kind of like, it's a Kirby game, and it's one of the best rated games on Switch.
Is a highly rated Pokemon game.
Yes. So, like, and the thing is, I understand, like, Kirby, I think, is falling out to an 84 on Metacritic or something. I don't know, wherever it's going to settle at. It's obviously a balance between 84 and 85 right now, but it's just interesting because my thing is, I think it's so far, and it feels weird saying this, I think it's the best Kirby game I've ever played, and I'm only maybe halfway through. And I already feel that confident that the amount of fun I've had to this point tops any other game that I have actually beaten in the series. And it feels weird to say that then, this is how much you really care about review scores. You look at the general reviews and you're like, how is this not the highest rated Kirby game ever? And I get it. That's when you start caring about aggregate scores and caring about this, because it's funny. All these outlets, it'll be like, you read the reviews and they're like, oh yeah, this is the best Kirby's ever been. But then at that same outlet, you'll see that they ranked other Kirby games higher. And as I always tell people, the person saying that is not the same person who did those other reviews.
Right.
So like, that's the context that's missed. Oh, IGN gave Canvas Curse a higher rating. No, the person who played Canvas Curse rated it a certain way, and he wasn't the same person that reviewed this game. But for the author that did that review, this is the best Kirby game ever. I think it's all arbitrary. I think the free demo helped the game. I think that the positive reception by the fans and the media, and that people are having a really hard time saying anything negative other than it's easy. But everybody knows Kirby's easy, and people are still having fun in spite of it.
There's only 12 abilities.
Is it 12 or 50? I don't even know. I don't even know if I've got.
There's only 12 abilities. Trash. All those abilities can upgrade them. It does not count the machine, the mouthful abilities.
Oh, the mouthful mode too. Oh, dude, mouthful mode. It's one of my greatest I've ever seen.
I think mouthful mode is slept on, because I think people see it when they see a trailer, like, oh, that's just like copy ability. It's a different name. It's not copy ability. It's a different name. It's like mouthful mode gives you like so copy abilities are more for like combat. Mouthful abilities are more for like platforming. There's a bit of a blurred line situation there, because some of the mouthful abilities can be used for offense, and some of the copy abilities can be used for platforming. But if we're generalizing, mouthful abilities are more for platforming, and copy abilities are more for offense.
When they clicked for me, because like I did the demo, so the car was like whatever. Okay, yeah, you can make one with a staircase, and okay, that's cool. But it clicked for me when I was in the water world and I got to fly, and I'm like, this feels like a Star Fox game at the moment, and this is inside Kirby. I am really liking this right now. What is happening? This is way more fun than this has any right to be, and it's not even difficult. And then I had to do it again because I missed a Waddle Dee that's only available in that flight mode through an alternative path that I didn't even know existed. And I'm like, this is awesome. I'm sorry, this is one of the most creative things they've done with Kirby in so long. I love it.
And so cool couple of things from what you said there. One, there's that discovery element, right? Finding those Waddle Dees. It's fun. Like, it's not this. There are hidden paths and things. Like, sometimes you have to play through a level a few times to figure it out. So it actually adds value there. But then also to your point about the mouthful stuff, it adds a lot of variety. It keeps mixing up the gameplay. It doesn't get stale. It's very fresh and varied. And polished, too. It all feels very smooth.
Yes, and I also like that one of the key achievements, and I don't really think this is considered much of a spoiler, is that you have to beat every boss without taking damage. Is always like one of the achievements.
Oh God, you ruined it for me.
And it's like, that is so, like, okay, it's not difficult. It's not, but like, because it's not, you get in this habit of just not caring if you get hit and spamming attacks, and all of a sudden you get done beating the boss and you're like, oh, I was supposed to beat him without taking damage. Oh, I was supposed to beat him without a copy ability and not take damage at the same time.
Some of the extra little challenges, again, it's kind of like when you want to go that extra level and 100% the game, there is difficulty to be found there.
Yeah. And again, they're not the most difficult boss fights in the world to avoid damage on or beat without copy abilities, but it's just, it takes you out of the mind frame that the entire game keeps putting you in. Get your ability, overpower everything, spam it everywhere, kill everything, have fun, explore, and then all of a sudden, oh, by the way, now let me take away all those things, and now you have to do it.
I think it's challenging enough to make you try harder, to make you be like, okay, I got a game plan a little bit.
Yeah,
and
you got to think.
You may fail once or twice depending on the situation.
And that happens in the time trials. You're trying to get a certain way, and all of a sudden you'll be like 5 seconds in, and you're like, I'm not gonna have enough time. Restart.
Yeah. Well, when you do it the first time without even thinking about it, you do it, and you're like, wait, how do I beat that 20 seconds faster? Oh my God. And then you do it. But
like the ones like, 30 seconds. I'm like, how the hell do I get through? And then like there was this really clever one. I don't want to spoil much, where you actually use your ability and you go over these massive gaps that you would just die in normally. Didn't even know I could do that until that moment. Did no idea the ability worked that way. And I was like, oh, and it probably took me a half hour before I realized I could do that, and I discovered it by accident. Because the game doesn't tell you that ability does that.
Yeah.
So like it was awesome because I'm like, as soon as I did that, I'm like, oh yeah, I can beat this in 30 seconds. But it took me a half hour to even figure out I could even do it. I kept thinking, okay, I got to get my path just right, and I just kept coming like 5 seconds, 6 seconds short. There's something I'm missing. I'm not even getting hit. I'm hitting everything perfectly. What's going on? I still can't make it. Oh, this enemy just knocked me off, but I didn't fall right away. Well, okay then, let me try this for a sec. Oh my god, my mind is blown. Why didn't the game... And that's one thing, the game doesn't tell you how the abilities work.
You kind of have to figure it out. Like there's a little bit of a moveset to them, and they're all not all exactly the same, right? Like when you have the sword, there is a combo with the kick slide, but that combo doesn't always work with that. For others, it might be, for example, like with the ice one, if you tap B repeatedly going down a slope, you have like a little force field thing.
Still haven't figured that one out. People keep telling me about it, and I still haven't figured it out.
You have to do it to beat one of the mini parallel universe challenges.
I think Eric did that one for me.
Yeah. It basically, if you're going down a slope, you just have to...
going back and forth on those.
If you're going down a slope, you have to press... I think it's B repeatedly. If it's either B or A, one or the other. The game tells you when you go there. Yeah.
Oh, it does? Okay.
Yeah. I want to get to the chat because we are running out of time, and I haven't talked about Mario Kart. I know it's technically a topic from last week, but I said I would talk about
DLC!
it. And I haven't talked about it with anyone, so I want to talk about it. But just let me check with the chat real quick here. A few things. Octokraken, what about Splatoon 3? Is anyone else excited? The hype has died down due to the lack of marketing for the fan base lately. Splatoon 3 is a big deal for me. Yeah. I think there's just so much to enjoy right now that there's not really any... It's the same reason... We're going to talk about it actually on Nate's podcast later this week. And I have a video about it that came out on Saturday. But it's kind of like why I'm... Part of the reasons why I'm not super excited for Breath of the Wild 2 right now. I know that once Nintendo shows off Breath of the Wild 2, I have full faith that it's going to be my most anticipated game. But how I'm feeling right now... I'm more concerned with Elden Ring and Kirby and Switch Sports and Mario Strikers and Monster Hunter. And then after that, then Splatoon, then Xenoblade Chronicles 3 and Pokemon, and then hopefully Breath of the Wild 2. Like, there's just so much other things I'm more concerned with right now. So I think that also applies to Splatoon 3. There's so much going on right now with what Nintendo's pushing and marketing. Once we get by some of these games for the first half of the year, then Splatoon 3 will have its big sort of marketing cycle. I think we'll be a lot more excited about it. Because, I mean, objectively, I think Splatoon 3 is going to be amazing. Like, Splatoon 2 is amazing. I'm going to enjoy Splatoon 3 even more. Because I have full faith the team will make an even better game. So, yeah. Even if it's not better, if it's basically the same as Splatoon 2, but just more of it, that's fine too. It's going to be fun. Jean-Carl added me. Developers of HAL Laboratory stated more 3D mainline Kirby might in the future. Maybe in the future. They absolutely should. It kind of goes back to what we were talking about with Breath of the Wild and the marketing for that. If this game becomes the best-selling Kirby game yet, they obviously struck gold, and they were like, well, okay, if we just had our best-selling game yet, should we make another one? No. Let's go back to what we did before where we made less money. They're probably going to make more 3D Kirby's if this one's really successful. Now, you could also argue budget, like does the amount it costs and resources and effort warrant the sales? We'll see, but something tells me the answer is going to be probably yes. So, I do think that this isn't the last 3D Kirby. This could be just the beginning of 3D Kirby more often. They may take a little bit longer because they're a little bit more ambitious, but yeah. Royal added me. I'm on the 6th world in Kirby, and I agree. With each world, the game gets better. Well, that's reassuring to hear. Very reassuring to hear. It does measure up with what people are saying on reviews and such. I think Birdman was Senpai was saying that you can break coconuts in the game. Yeah, I've broken some coconuts. It's kind of funny. There's just a lot of little things you can do, which is something I really appreciate for the game. And there is a mall in Kirby, which does remind me a little bit of Coconut Mall, because it's a mall. What is it with mall and Nintendo games? I don't know. But on the note of Coconut Mall, let's talk about that Mario Kart DLC, which includes a remade Coconut Mall. So, Nate, have you had an opportunity to play with the tracks?
Yes.
Brandon, I know right now you haven't had a chance to play them, or unless you did, you haven't told me. But I'm sure you've definitely examined them to the length you have. What do you guys make of these two Grand Prix so far? I really like them, but What do you guys think?
Every track is trash, but 2.
Really?
Damn.
Whoa,
Harsh.
that's bold. 2 of 8. Man, harsh. Okay, which ones? Which ones are good?
The only ones that are good are the Ninja Hideaway and Oka Mall, which even that's technically worse than it used to be, but
Those are
still.
the 2 I would have thought you would say. Yeah.
I thought you were going to say Paris
The reason
Promenade.
I say this is because in Mario Kart 8, even in the remade tracks from the old games to this point, 200cc is difficult because there's a lot of really tight turns combined with a lot of obstacles. Most of these courses have 0 obstacles, and I 3-starred the cups on my very first try, and I suck at 200cc, and I haven't even 3-starred the cups on any. I have not 3-starred 200cc in any other cup in Mario Kart 8. And these ones, without me even playing Mario Kart 8 really, and be outside of live stream events like twice a year, I literally destroyed them, and the only ones that had any challenge were the final courses in each one. The rest have like no obstacles. It's really straightforward. Looks cool, like, oh, the Paris one. Okay, yeah, it looks cool outside of the track, but the actual racetrack, it's just a straight path with an occasional turn. It just, there's no challenge to the actual racing part, which you could say, oh, you don't play. All the other Mario Kart 8 tracks have a challenge to the actual racing part. This doesn't. The challenge is just, oh, if someone hits you with an item or not. Well, okay, that's true on every course. What makes these unique? I guess they're unique in that they're super easy. like the easiest I've ever had in Mario Kart in my life. I've never had courses this easy. Maybe that's because some of it comes from Tour, and Tour's made for phones, so it's made for a different way where they wanted these courses to be easier for the touch controls. And
yeah,
I can understand that. Like, I can understand some of these Tour courses would be more hard on a phone because you don't have the fine-tuned control you do in Mario Kart 8. But not all of these courses are from that. Like, why do we have to have the cars not move at the end of Coconut Mall? There's no reason to. That adds to the challenge of the course. You remove that, you remove the challenge. Like, I don't get mad about the escalator thing. Oh, it's an escalator or it's not. It doesn't matter. You drive up it either way.
Yeah,
but
I thought that one was weird.
I thought, like, I get it. They don't need indicators, but whatever. That doesn't actually make the course more difficult. But the movement at the end did. Those were your obstacles, and they just kind of got rid of them. So, I don't know. To me, it's too easy. And that feels weird to say for Mario Kart, but I love all the other 48 tracks because they all have a level of challenge to the actual race. These don't. I'm 200cc, almost lapping the computer when I can't even 3-star any of the other cups at 200cc. Like, that's a problem.
You know, I didn't really think that the tracks were easier, so that's an interesting point. But then again, I think I play more Mario Kart than you do. So, you know, I don't know. Maybe you're just really good.
Last time I played a lot of Mario Kart was Wii U.
Yeah. So fun. Nah, I'm not going to get into that. I mean, I mentioned it. On Wii U, I would play with one hand, and I would eat ice cream with the other. Because the gamepad... So because the GameCube was such a big controller, right? You could turn on gyro controls, right? And you could press the triggers and the item with like this. And then I could drift. But I could also press the items by tapping the gamepad on my thigh while just having a sandwich or ice cream with my right hand. And I would beat my friends. So, it was fun.
I mean, you could still do that with this game, even without.
Yeah, but it's not as conducive.
You don't feel as much of a baller. It's the same control. It's motion controls.
It's just they because the gamepad was so wide, it was easy to slap the trigger on my thigh and press it. On the Pro controller, I probably could still do it, but that's the Xbox. It's different.
Well, oh my gosh. Okay. Switch controller, same shape.
Okay, I mean, maybe I probably could still do it. But
yeah,
anyway.
especially if you put like a pillow here, or like, you know, you just gonna prop the knee up. Yeah, you can still
just eat. Yeah, anyway.
I mean, you can also just play like this and just set the bowl in front of you and just.
Yeah, I could. But it's besides the point.
I'm just saying.
Besides the point.
Or buy a wheel. Get the Wii wheel, put the Joy-Con in.
Maybe that's what I should do. Yeah.
That might be the solution for you.
I only brought it up because you brought up Wii U. But anyway, I do think it's interesting you bring up that the tracks are easier. And because a lot of them are based off Tour, I don't even know to what extent, because I think Brandon, I think I spoke about it with you the other day. I don't know this. Maybe some of you guys have done more research on it or have heard, but apparently there's just a lot of tracks they've made for Tour that haven't even come out yet. And if we're seeing something that's not in Tour yet, it's going to be in Tour, and it was made for Tour, and they simply took that and repurposed it for Mario Kart 8. If that's the case, that does put a bit of a damper on the tracks. I personally don't have a problem with these tracks too much. I do think from a graphical perspective there are some things that are kind of lame. Like even in the highly praised Ninja Hideaway, like if you veer off a little bit, or like even when you like do the big jump and you look down, everything has like no textures. It's just like all flat. It's like it just seems like it is kind of just straight ripped from Tour and just, you know, upscaled. It
is a Tour track. So.
Yeah, I mean it is. There are parts that look good. It's just kind of like they improved like half the tracks.
Attention to detail.
Yeah. So there is a little bit of that. And it's not even an issue of the visuals, because if I were to play it on Tour, I'd be like, oh, this is a good looking thing for what it is, right? But because it's in the same packaging, or it's in the same game as Mario Kart 8, and you go and play the other tracks, there is a visual mismatch. And it's not... Before, I was like, hey, it's an art style difference, that's okay. But it's not just an art style difference. It's a straight up, hey, this just doesn't have... They just didn't add textures here. Or whatever they did is very, very minimal work. Because you can make, you know, like, there are... It works to some extent. Like, I'm okay with the more vibrant art, maybe slightly more toony art style. But there are portions that you can just kind of see, oh, they just didn't add anything there. So that does dampen things a little bit, but overall, you know, I think the tracks are still aesthetically pleasing. They're still fun to sort of play through. I enjoy them. I think the music is awesome, for the record. Like that, I think that's probably a standout. They redid all the music, and it all sounds really good. And I think the tracks are fun, but you know, it is an interesting point, Nate, that maybe because they were based off Tour, they're more simplified.
Well, like to give you an example. I can hold accelerate the entire time and never hit anything. Or go off the track. And that's not how 200cc is on any other course. I have to brake, I have to take my hand off the accel. You know, I have to actually pay attention not to run into things. And in this, it's literally just, here's my turn. Oh, look, like in the Paris one. Oh, look, there's a roundabout, right? Well, what we would call a roundabout, but it's just two paths. Okay, well, the roundabout is so wide that I could just hold accelerate and not care.
Counter argument.
There's this, like the highway one. Legitimately, there is some a bit more strategy involved with that one. And I did have to brake on that one, especially if you want to go with the hidden path on it. So there is like that, and I would say a little bit more of it in the mall. Although I think it's more of because the areas are more confined, so the turns are a little bit tighter. Right. That made me have to brake sometimes, but. Literally none of the other courses. I literally hard held A all the way through.
Most of the challenge comes from the computers just mauling me.
Yeah.
You know,
and that's not the case in the other courses. I have to think, how am I going to cut this corner? When am I going to tap brake?
I want to speak on in relation to that, though. I think one thing to consider is that these are all remade tracks, right? Remade tracks of older tracks, excluding the Tour ones, of older tracks that were on simpler hardware, so the designs were probably also a little simpler.
Mario Kart 8 already has remade tracks in it from other games.
And they're pretty good.
And they're not like this.
That also kind of goes to the point of there wasn't as much effort going into the reimagining of some of these tracks. I think
it's obvious that these are clearly just remastered tracks that they wanted to put just enough effort in to look passable, but obviously they didn't remake them from scratch. Otherwise they would have just made them look like Mario Kart 8. It's obviously still in the Tour style. They didn't bother to remake it.
I want to be careful when I...
There's a lot of tracks.
Oh yeah. I want to be careful when I say my complaints. I'd rather have these than not. So I still want the DLC. I still want to see what else is coming. And it's entirely possible future tracks are going to be more difficult and going to be maybe even better aesthetically pleasing. Maybe they take more time on them. I don't know, because we don't even have them announced. We do have a data mine that kind of gives us an idea of what tracks we might have coming. And yes, it looks like a lot of Tour tracks, which I totally expected, because I actually think the team behind Mario Kart Tour is the one making this DLC.
It'd be interesting to get confirmation on that.
Surprised.
I actually think I'm all for that because the tour tracks feel new to me.
I kept looking for the credits. The credits when you get into the cup. And I didn't seem to see anything that indicated it was that team specifically, but I don't know that you would because it's just DLC, and I'm sure some of the Mario Kart teams help. So I don't know.
You don't get to see the end game credits for every Grand Prix.
Yeah.
Right? So, but if we go to the base game, I think there's two, right? It's like the end Grand Prix for a particular row. Those give you the credits.
Yes.
Which brings me to the other point I said there's two things I wanted to address, and it kind of alludes to what you were just sort of talking about, or you were alluding to, I should say. These are the beginning Grand Prix. The beginning Grand Prix in general are easier. So it could be the case that they're just easier because they're based off tour, to your point. It also could be the case that they were intentionally easy because these are meant to be the beginning Grand Prix.
Just happens to be the easiest Grand Prix in the entire game.
Well, that is subjective.
I don't really know that it is. You just said most of the challenge came from the computer. Would you say that about the other Grand Prix?
That's still my opinion.
Okay.
Which is also subjective.
The thing is, you obviously play a lot more Mario Kart than me, so like those courses too might feel easy.
My point is that I didn't even realize that they were easier until you said it, and I would have to kind of go back and reassess. I'm not.
Yeah, you have to rethink like what was Mario Kart 8 like when I first played it.
Because also the first Grand Prix are just kind of easy in general, though. Sure. They're pretty darn easy.
The only one I would say is easy. There's two courses that get the only challenge to me is really from the computer, and one of those that'd be Excite Bike, which there is some skill. You're not dumb. You have a mushroom or whatever, cut your corners and save time. Or like the Toad's Raceway or whatever, where that's the whole point. It's 8 really short laps with a bunch of items, and it's just why it's crazy.
That's the Baby Park.
The Baby Park, Baby Park. Besides those, I think all of the rest have some sort of obstacles and stuff in the core. I'm not saying these are hard obstacles, but they're there, and I have to think about it on 200cc. And there just was nothing. Like some of these courses, there was literally nothing in the road.
I'll tell you this. When I did them in 200cc, I did notice that it was easier for me. But I was thinking, yes, they finally designed these tracks with 200cc in mind.
200cc. I was like, hey, these other tracks weren't designed for 200cc, so that's why they're hard. But also, it's like, but that also kind of became the charm of 200cc is that the tracks became harder because you were going faster. So,
and actually, I mean, I love that what they did with Deluxe by adding the braking while drifting, which is a cool new mechanic. Yes. Plus the purple drift, plus the double item, like all of that kind of remixes the gameplay a lot, especially when stacked on top of 200cc.
Yeah, it makes it feel fresh for people who played Wii U.
Yeah. So I appreciate all that. Nothing like that.
The Mii's that make me miss Miiverse on the multiplayer.
And
all the little Mii's run on screen, and we could do all those little emote interactions, and I'm like, God, where's Miiverse, man? I miss when you could turn on your Wii U and you have all your friends running around.
It was cool, but I don't miss it.
Oh, I miss it, man.
I have some like thinking about it, there are some feelings of nostalgia, but it's not something I have a yearning for.
Well, like Miiverse, well, that's a whole nother conversation. We can talk about Miiverse.
We don't have a lot of time. You got to stream soon.
Yeah, there was a thing about Miiverse I really liked, but that's for a conversation for a different day.
Well, maybe we'll talk about it on Wednesday on your show.
We'll see. Maybe it's one of the topics.
Yeah. So it's gonna be interesting.
Why Wii U was better than Switch?
Lies. Anyway.
Anyways, go on.
We don't have time. We don't have the time. I think just to kind of close out the Mario Kart conversation, they're enjoyable tracks. I think they're pretty, but there are some kind of like blotches, in terms of like missing textures or just missing textures has a negative connotation. I do mean negative connotation. There are things that I think could be better. But overall, they're fine. I enjoy them. I love playing them. I played them repeatedly. So they're good enough. And I also, like you, Nate, I am excited for what's to come. I'm going to play through it. But I also think, because it's the beginning, there is a lot of room for improvement. Maybe they will get better with the development with these tracks as they focus more and more on it. And also to the difficulty point, maybe because these are just the earlier Grand Prix, they are intentionally easier overall. But as we progress, we will get harder ones. We'll see. I do see the super chat here from Taker610. Is Switch ports the only first-party Nintendo published release confirmed for April and May? What else are you guys looking forward to before E3? Well, yeah, Advance Wars was delayed beyond... Well, we don't know when it's coming yet, I don't think. But it was delayed, we don't indefinitely. We'll see when that comes. But Switch Sports is a big April game at this point. I don't think we know about anything major for May. And then in June, we have Strikers and Fire Emblem. I'm kind of thinking Advance Wars comes out in May. I don't know if that's just a guess. I don't know. But yeah, Switch Sports is kind of like the big one for me. I'm really excited for it. So yeah, I can't wait for that. But right now I got Kirby to play, so I'm focused on Kirby right now. I'm also playing Cuphead actually, which is pretty good. Rel added me. We've also been playing Mario Kart 8 since 2014. That's why it might be easier as well. I think the tracks are awesome. Maybe we're just Mario Kart geniuses. Could be. Could be. But anyways, Brandon, Nate, is there anything else you guys kind of want to talk about in relation to Mario Kart or Kirby or Zelda before we call it a night?
No.
Zelda Breath of the Wild 2 has a lot to live up to because of Kirby.
What?
What? It's a very loaded statement.
Yeah.
So it's not just because of Kirby. So like Breath of the Wild.
So you're not joking?
Part of what, no, I'm not. Part of what made Breath of the Wild special, was that first time new stuff Zelda. Some people even argue it doesn't feel like a Zelda game because of all the new. But that's also part of what made it so special is it was such a fresh experience. And then you come to fast forward to today, we have Pokemon Legends Arceus. Feels like such a fresh experience for Pokemon after all these years of really samey stuff. Then you get to Kirby. Very fresh experience for a long-standing IP. And now we have Breath of the Wild 2 coming that's building off of what was a fresh experience. And we keep getting reminded with games like this that Nintendo still has all these great ideas and great ways to make franchises fresh. How are they going to do that with that game? Or are they going to rest on their laurels? And I guess we wait to find out. But Kirby just reminded me when I was playing it, even just this morning, that part of the reason this is so great is because it's so different from everything I've ever played in Kirby. And I can't say that's what's going to happen in Breath of the Wild 2, but we'll see.
It's a challenge being a straight up sequel, though, right?
Yep, and it's always a challenge when you're a sequel. And you'd be like, I don't remember ever complaining about this before, but I don't. The thing is, the last time I feel like we've had this many fresh takes on different IPs was maybe the transition into 3D during the N64 days.
Yeah, which is another reason why Switch is just blatantly better than any previous Nintendo system, which absolutely includes the Wii U. A conversation for another time.
The Switch is my favorite system of all time. But I don't know that blatantly better. Because the games, I wouldn't say the games are necessarily better because of the Switch.
Would you agree that Breath of the Wild deserves to be considered in the top 3 best Zeldas ever?
Yes, and it's on Wii U.
Okay. I'm just talking about... Okay, let's continue. Would you agree that Mario Odyssey deserves to be considered in the top 3 best 3D Marios ever?
Yeah, probably.
How about Metroid Dread and 2D Metroid?
Metroid Dread's probably my favorite of the 2D Metroids.
Okay. What about Kirby? Kirby and the Forgotten Land.
It's my favorite Kirby, yeah.
Smash Ultimate?
I played the 5th on fighting games, so I'm not really that into them, so.
Okay.
It's probably the best, but I don't think my opinion on that matters.
Do you see where I'm going with here, though? Like, Switch has...
Sure, but maybe how much of it are the best because of Switch? Or is it just so happens Switch was the platform out when Nintendo had these ideas? Because Breath of the Wild, hey, guess what? One of the, top 5, top 3 best-selling games on Switch was a Wii U game. The best-selling game on Switch was a Wii U game.
Well, I think just the fact that it's on the Switch, it makes the Switch better. Like, I think the argument you're making
is does the system enhance the game? Off of the laurels of Wii U.
the Switch.
And you can argue the whole idea of the Switch could have actually originated with the Wii U gamepad.
And I mean, it did. Sure. I mean, well, first
that
of all,
doesn't bother me. That's not saying the Switch isn't better. Again,
the Switch is a combination of ideas from beforehand, right? Like the Switch is a culmination.
Feels like we need
of
a discussion video on this.
Yes,
we could talk about this.
This
for like an hour.
Let's straight up. It's a perfect video idea. Is a Switch the best Nintendo system of all time? And we could.
Oh, that'd be a fun debate.
We could just go at it.
Interesting arguments for that.
Yeah, you know, I was thinking about messaging you the other day. This is probably something I could have just DM'd you about instead of saying it publicly, but whatever. Like, what if we did? I'm
getting blasted publicly right now, so
I'm not blasting anything. But
no, but not about video game opinions today. But that's okay.
We're not gonna get political here. Anyway, how would you feel if we did a debate on if Switch Pro or next gen Switch is happening?
Sure.
We need a moderator though.
What side are you taking? So I know what side I'm taking.
You take Switch Pro because you've been making videos about it.
So I take it that Switch Pro's happening. Okay, got it.
Unless you don't believe it. I mean,
I wouldn't make videos if I didn't.
You know, it'd be fun though, right? Like, even if we could even like start a video saying, hey, look, we're not necessarily picking a side, but we don't necessarily believe in a particular side, but we're gonna pick one and just debate for that. Like, that would also be a fun kind of mental exercise, just to like argue.
I think it's happening, so it's cool.
Okay, well then it makes it easier.
Perfect.
We just need a moderator.
Yes, we do need a moderator. You always need. That's a mistake I've made in some debates. I've done I've done some with Player Essence, which didn't have a moderator, so sometimes it felt like it got more heated than it probably should have.
Yeah.
And him and I never got offended at each other, but there wasn't. It's not the optics between me and him. It's the optics for the audience being like, hey, no one's here to calm this down for a second.
Yeah. We'll have to like hash all the details. Like, the idea here is to not make it like a straight up podcast like we normally do. It's kind of like something a bit more refined.
It's a debate.
Yeah.
The debate. Yeah.
So, but just an idea, guys in the chat. Stay tuned. It may happen. It may not. We don't know. We'll talk about it.
Fun.
But guys, make sure to check out Nintendo Prime's channel. It is linked in the description below. Also,
I'll be live in 15 minutes.
He'll be live in 15 minutes. Make sure to go over to his stream. Brandon's latest video, which has been there for years, so it's not really that recent. But his last project, link in the description below. And if you want to see more of him, you should just follow me if you're not following me already. So make sure you're subscribed, leave a like, and we'll see y'all really soon. Take care, guys.
Bye.